911 emergency. How may I help you?
In recent years, people on the Sunshine Coast and in Canada as a whole have become familiar with the 911 emergency program and rely on these services to provide police, fire, and ambulance in the case of emergencies. However, in the event of a disaster such as forest fire, earthquake, or pandemic, what resources would you call upon? Bill Elsner, coordinator for the Sunshine Coast Emergency Program, addresses this question.
The Emergency Operations Center would be located at the SCRD office in Field Road. This is a post-seismically constructed building and has a diesel generator with a 3-day supply of fuel. Part of my responsibilities are to make sure that the Emergency Operations Center is ready to operate during a disaster. The Emergency Planning Committee has meetings once a month where management and command staff of all the emergency response organizations, volunteers, utilities, and public works agencies meet to discuss issues of common concern and become familiar with each other prior to working together on an actual event. This committee is where exercises are planned and reviewed. Some of my responsibilities include coordinating emergency responders, maintaining the Vital Services Directory, which is an updated list of suppliers and services, maintaining and updating the Emergency Response and Recovery Plan, which is the guide that we use for disaster response and recovery. I provide training to Emergency Operations Center staff. Public education is a large part of my job. It's very important for the public to understand what hazards there are on the Sunshine Coast, how to prepare for them. And as well, I apply for funding and administer grants and aid to the volunteer groups. The area that I'm responsible for is the lower Sunshine Coast from Langdale to Earls Cove. There are a variety of agencies involved in the emergency program. Emergency radio volunteers build and maintain backup radio communication systems.
Morning all, this is Victor Echo 7 Foxtrot Juliet Kilo. Bob at the mic this morning, calling the regular Tuesday morning Sunshine Coast Emergency Net. Do we have any check-ins this morning for the net? If so, go now please.
These numbers tell you that we're registered in British Columbia, and 7 says British Columbia, VE or VA says Canada, FJK is the licensed call sign, tells you specifically who owns that license and who's authorized to be on there. And each one of us have a different call sign, but the VE7 is the standard prefix for, or VA7, depending on when you got your exam nowadays. And those calls are recognized around the world. Like in the VHF area, 2 meters, we go from 144 to 148. And in there we have coordinated frequencies for repeaters. We have frequencies that are assigned to packet, other things assigned to digital operations, and just whatever, pretty well whatever you want to work on and experiment on. Satellite communications and everything else. There's boys that are bounce their signals off the moon and everything, and get into big fancy antennas and rotors on them to turn around and aim them. And there's satellites up there we can track. We can even talk to the space station when they're within range. Everybody.
Any last comments or questions before we close the net this morning? Hearing none, we'll say thank you very much for checking in. We'll listen for you again next Tuesday, same time, same station, 73 all. This is V7 Foxtrot Juliet Kilo out.
Search and Rescue conducts rescues in remote areas and inland waters.
We have about 24 people, 24 members, men and women, who are well trained and capable of doing all the necessary things on a search for missing people, whether it's someone lost in the bush or in the mountains or on a trail somewhere or even in urban areas. These people are trained in all the search methods that they need to know, how to take care of themselves in the bush. They're trained in first aid. Some of them have grade 3 first aid, which is very useful. Some of the members have training in rope rescue, higher angle rope rescue, which is necessary and is used quite often to bring people out from where they've fallen somewhere.
You're going to be working on the rock.
And these people are called on call all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they're called by the RCMP when they need help to find someone who has gone missing, wherever he might be or she might be. They're able to stay out there under any conditions, weather conditions, for at least 12 hours and probably longer, in winter or summer, so they know exactly what they're doing and they know what they're up against. We have all the first aid equipment necessary, rope rescue equipment, stretchers and all that sort of thing. We have a brand new vehicle just obtained recently, a beautiful vehicle, 4-wheel drive, which will take us up most of the logging roads that are accessible, to set up a communications base and a command post for any tasks that we need to do. So really, we're very well equipped all round and very well trained.
Coast Guard Auxiliary provides marine rescue as well as transportation to other emergency responders when required.
On the Sunshine Coast, there are 3 auxiliary Coast Guard units. There's one in Gibsons, one in Pender Harbor, and a unit in Half Moon Bay. Whenever there's a marine emergency in either one of our areas, we can be tasked out on a 24/7 basis. We will assist in marine matters on the coastal waters of the Sunshine Coast. There's no specific training required to join a Canadian Coast Guard Auxiliary unit. Once you've joined the unit, there will be training provided, and that training will consist of such things as boat handling, navigation, search patterns, electronic training, radio training. In addition, you'll receive first aid courses, so you're proficient in emergency first aid. It will vary depending on what type of situation you may be faced with. The training will be geared towards many different facets of on-the-water emergencies. Towing, for example, is a very common one. We'll train on how to tow different vessels and different ways of towing these different vessels and bringing them into safe harbor. Each unit is on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with a coxswain and a crew. And that coxswain and crew will usually take his crew out at least once during that 7-day period, and they will train in some specific facet.
The scenario was that a certain number of people have been tipped out of a boat into the ocean, and some were able to swim and were able to extricate themselves to the shore, some were not. And the Coast Guard needed assistance. Some had got ashore and were dissipated into the bush on an island, and into the bush. So the old thing was to get these people who were possibly injured into safety and bring them back to where they could be put in an ambulance. That was the exercise, and the main idea was the cooperation between the Coast Guard Auxiliary and the search and rescue, and it went very well indeed. It was a combined effort to see how we work together and see what problems we might run into with communication and that sort of thing, and it was a very good exercise in that regard. It went perfectly well. So, well, I think generally speaking, most of the people who join us are people who do get involved with outdoor activities, you know, whether it's mountain biking or hiking or skiing and that sort of thing, and are familiar with the bush. Not all of them. We sometimes get people who've never been up a mountain in their life or never done anything in the bush at all, really. We sometimes get people who have worked in the bush and they know what it's like out there, and they feel that they can be of use to the community and looking for people who are lost. In my own case, I mean, I used to do a lot of mountaineering myself when I was a little bit younger and fitter, and the thought came to me many times that I was up there in the miles out in the mountains somewhere and I might break my ankle or something like that. Something happened to me, and then someone would have to come out and see where I was and try and get me out of there. And I thought, well, if I'm expecting people to do that for me, I might as well do it for other people as well. So that's one of the reasons. I think a lot of the other members feel the same way. So, but generally speaking, it's good to be involved, and they're a good group of people to be with, and you're doing something that is fulfilling a need, and that's one thing that I think is well worthwhile, very satisfying.
The men and women that join the auxiliary Coast Guard units probably join for many and various reasons, some of which I couldn't even think of now, but in the main part, they're very community-oriented people. They wish to assist their community. They feel that they can assist their community by joining a marine search and rescue unit. We have a large number of vessels that transit our area from both United States and Canada. If these people get into trouble, they want to make sure that they've received adequate assistance and brought back into safe harbor. And as I say, they're just people that wish to give back to their community and give back as much as they can. And they do that by being on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for, in the case of Half Moon Bay, one week a month that they do that. I can't say enough about them. They're just there when you need them. They're like all the other search and rescue people. They have a motivation that goes beyond what you would normally expect.
The Salvation Army provides food and emotional support to emergency responders.
In the onset of disaster, we want to be a support for the emergency program in regards to the first responders when we're out on site. That would be providing meals, because when they're out, say, doing a search and rescue or doing their job, they don't need to have to worry about a meal. So we would come out and supply a meal for the first responders. And also in the event of where the disaster is large, or sometimes trauma might take a hold on an individual, being a pastor myself and my wife, we're able to deal with some of those issues when it comes to emotional support. We're very fortunate here at the Salvation Army in our emergency disaster services. We have many volunteers who give up of their time wanting to come out to be a part of something good, and they feel that as they're a part of this program, they give back to their community, and they have a passion for helping people in time of need and in time of distress. In regards to the first responders, when they're out there, they don't need to have to worry about a meal. In a widespread disaster, I'm a part of the BC Emergency Response Team, where I would be deployed to an emergency operations center. And in the event that it would happen on the Sunshine Coast, I would probably be a part of the emergency operations center on Field Road, where I can call out and get more resources in regards to emergency disaster services. We have about 10 of these trucks. in BC, and within 3 hours I could probably have about 4 or 5 trucks here on the Sunshine Coast.
Emergency Social Services provides food, shelter, and clothing to victims of fires and disasters.
The Emergency Social Services Group get together once a month. We take a couple of months off in summer as everybody's gone away, usually starting back in September. At our last meeting in October, we had a practice run of a reception center. So we had all of the volunteers pretend that an emergency had happened. We got some of our boxes that we have stashed at different areas on the Sunshine Coast to confirm that we had everything that we would need in case of an emergency. And we went through them all, sorted things out. It helped us with the practice of just filling out, looking at the things that we have and that we need. The main purpose for the emergency social services on the Sunshine Coast is to provide that necessary, in case of disaster, assistance to those people who are vulnerable or who may need our services. A couple of the things that we would provide in the case of emergency, of course, would be location for people to evacuate to if necessary. They had to be removed from their homes. At that location, we would have services such as pet care, resources with regards to assisting people who would require food, shelter, and clothing for a period of up to 72 hours. We also provide services such as a registration and referral for those people, for actually everybody, so that in case of an emergency, that information can be passed to the Red Cross. We also, a part of our services is to facilitate the neighborhood emergency program.
And we do 2 basic training sessions for neighborhoods. The first one is in how to organize and what it's all about, how to prepare before a disaster, how to react during a disaster, and how to survive after a disaster or an emergency. And it's not limited to something like a big earthquake. It now encompasses any type of emergencies that we might be involved with, such as the windstorms we had last year. And the second session is on how to get the team organized and how to get it going and to set up individual roles within that team and how to do that.
I would say that the emergency social service, we consider ourselves the heart of the disaster response. The first responders are there to look after the incident or the disaster. We're here to look after the people.
There are 6 fire departments on the Sunshine Coast, made up of 175 dedicated volunteers.
Training in the fire service is something that starts from the day you walk in the fire hall. Our volunteers, they need to commit at least 2 hours a week at our weekly training session, which is Wednesday night. And in addition to that, we have approximately 3 call-outs per week. You know, we're about 150, 170 call-outs per year, so we use those call-outs as a practical training experience as well. We have several weekend courses that are required of our firefighters, especially their first few years as a member. So they go away and do live fire training out at the Fire Academy in Maple Ridge, and several other weekend training courses like first aid and auto extrication. We have a group of officers that help manage the fire department, and they have extra training as well. There's a year-long training course for you to be an officer in the Sea Shield department. The staff have extra training responsibilities that are directly connected to their job here at the fire station, so they have extra training as well, and as well as participating in the weekly training. So it's all about training here. What we find is if we train people really well, they tend to do really well on the fire ground, and then they can see the value of the training and they come back for more training. So it's a nice blend of training and operations here. We're busy enough to keep the people interested, but not so busy that we're run off our feet. In our group of 40 volunteer firefighters, we can provide the obvious services that you'd think a fire department would provide, such as firefighting. That would be both structural and forestry firefighting. Rescue services, we provide auto extrication. We provide light urban rescue services. We can provide low-angle rope rescue, and we can provide rescue from, say, flooded areas, that type of thing. We can also provide first aid services, and we have about 25 trained first responders in the fire department, and we can provide assistance to the emergency health services, and in the case of a disaster, perhaps help with triage and treatment, and even transport, if necessary, of injured people to a medical facility. And then there's ones that are not so obvious, and we can provide staffing for the Sunshine Coast Emergency Program in their Emergency Operations Center. We can provide people that know about logistics and operations, and we could provide public information officer, people that could be a spokesperson on behalf of the emergency program in the event of a disaster. We could also provide people that might be able to do a building assessment in the case of an earthquake where a building might be unstable. We have volunteers in the hall that have a lot of construction background that could provide that function. Another area we could assist in is if we needed some potable water brought to different areas of the Sunshine Coast. We could do that with our firefighting equipment. We could assist in water removal, and so say if there was a flooded area, we could perhaps remove the water from that area and start drying the place out. And we could also assist the emergency social services personnel, and that would, if there was a large contingent of people to register and house, we could probably help that as well. Why do people join a group such as this? Well, I'm a big believer in the inherent good in people, and people just want to do good. The fire service lends itself to that, and it's essential to our community. It's an essential service. We can't function as a community without people feeling safe and secure with their person and their property. And what we find is that when people are so busy these days, they want to know that the time that they do have to volunteer is going to be used in a constructive and appropriate way. They want to know that they're going to be well trained. They want to know that they're going to be kept safe as possible, and that the service they provide to the community is respected, and at the end of it all, that they want to know that they're going to be recognized for that. So we're big believers. We're big believers in that. And I've often thought, what makes a fire department tick? What makes people come in my front door? I still haven't really put my finger on it, but I think it has a lot to do with what I was just talking about.
I would like to personally thank the over 450 dedicated unpaid professionals who donate their time and experience to the service of others. Your efforts are greatly appreciated. The Sunshine Coast Emergency Program works closely with the RCMP.
First off, the Sunshine Coast RCMP is manned. We have 33 officers at this detachment. We also have 3 auxiliary constables, 10 support staff. Should we have a disaster of any magnitude on the Sunshine Coast, it would be very likely that all of the detachment officers would be called in to assist. That would be the first thing. The non-commissioned officers of the Sunshine Coast Detachment have all received incident command systems training. ICS training allows the officers to properly manage and become an incident commander at any incident where the situation is such that we've got multiple agencies assisting, or if it's an incident where just the RCMP are assisting and it's something that we have a large number of individuals involved. So we're trained in being able to assist our partners in the province with disaster management. And all of the emergency response teams, the Provincial Emergency Program, search and rescue coordinators, fire departments, emergency ambulance services, they are all trained in incident command systems training now. So we're all learning the same ideas and developing the same protocols when we attend these types of situations. Sunshine Coast Detachment has a backup generator. So if we have a major disaster, something such as an earthquake or something like that, where we may lose power, we've got a system set up that In the perfect world, we would have the building and our computer system still available to be used. We have numerous resources available to us. Those resources would include resources from the RCMP and other policing agencies from throughout the province and the country. I'm referring to police dogs, aircraft, emergency response team members. Virtually any assistance that we would need over here, we would be able to get. Now, there's also the partners that we deal with that are not in the policing agencies. We have monthly meetings with the Sunshine Coast Emergency Planning Group, and we're constantly discussing and briefing ourselves on what situations we can improve on and how we can work as a team to ensure that the Sunshine Coast is properly managed in terms of disasters. And should there be a major disaster or a disaster of any magnitude on the Sunshine Coast, we would automatically pool our resources and become partners with all the helping agencies on the Sunshine Coast. And that's basically how it would work.
The BC Ambulance Service plays a major role in disaster response.
Well, first of all, our day-to-day operations on the Sunshine Coast, we have 3 ambulance stations, one located in Gibsons, Sechelt, and Pender Harbour. At any given time, 24/7, we'll have 5 trauma units running out of those stations available to the general public. We also have a 2-stretcher ambulance available. Generally does patient transfers, but could be utilized in any sort of manner. It has emergency response capability. As well, we have a spare unit on the Sunshine Coast that we can upstaff for whatever reason. In the event of a multi-casualty incident, whether it be a 2-car car accident or a major incident at the mill, an earthquake, depending on the degree and the magnitude of the situation, inevitably one of the unit chiefs who run the stations on the Sunshine Coast would report to the Emergency Operations Center. There they would report to the incident commander of the event, whether it be out in the field or possibly up on Field Road at the Regional District Office. There they would establish communications, would be our first sort of line of attack. Our communications with the rescue personnel in the field, our communications with our dispatch center in Vancouver, as well as our communications with the paramedics who are in the field as well. Our strengths are, number one, our people on the Sunshine Coast. We have over 40 paramedics that live on the Sunshine Coast, either making their living as paramedics or in other parts of the industry. There are only 5 full-time positions here. All the other positions are staffed by people on a part-time basis. The majority of those people have jobs elsewhere on the Sunshine Coast. Another one of our strengths is that we are a provincial service, and so we have very quick and easy access to resources and personnel from the Lower Mainland or other parts of the province. We have ongoing emergency response planning done out of Vancouver, out of Victoria, and it's all done on a provincial basis that we are able to respond to small disasters, large disasters, or provincial disasters. Our priorities would, during a disaster or a multi-casualty incident, is to ensure and take care of the other personnel responding to that, so the people out in the field who are working with us, supporting us as we would support them so that we can get the job done. Another main priority would be to take care of the people in the care homes and or hospitals should evacuations need to take place. And those patients or people moved to gymnasiums or other holding areas. And inevitably our responsibilities lie with the general public, which is our basic mandate, is to take care of those people. Now, there are people that would be calling from areas that aren't affected, as well as those people needing help in the areas that are affected. As long as we can take care of ourselves and the people working with us, then we'll be able to then get to those people as well. Inevitably, the magnitude of the disaster will design the speed of our response and ability to cope with that.
Part of my responsibilities are to inspect and maintain the emergency medical supplies. As well, we have 2 casualty collection units, one located in Roberts Creek at the fire hall, and one located in Pender Harbor in a container behind the health clinic. The casualty collection units have blankets, stretchers, basic first aid equipment. These supplies are provided by the federal government and maintained by the local emergency programs. Recently, all have been refurbished and updated. On the Sunshine Coast, we have a 200-bed emergency hospital located behind Elphinstone School in Gibsons. It's located there to provide an alternate to St. Mary's Hospital in the event of a bridge closure or a road closure. We also have an advanced treatment center located in the Gibsons ambulance station. These supplies would be used for a mass casualty incident. They consist of stretchers, blankets, and basic emergency first aid equipment. In the event of a disaster, all suitable Sunshine Coast Regional District facilities would be available, as well as schools, camps, and hotels. Response times during a disaster will depend on the nature of the event. If there's significant road damage or infrastructure failure, response times might be delayed. Calls for help will be triaged, meaning response will be where the most good for the most people can be provided. Expect to be on your own for 72 hours. This is where you'll be relying on your neighbors and your own personal planning and supplies.
As we have seen in this program, there is planning in place and supplies at hand and agencies that we can join or contribute to aid in a disaster. However, there are also steps that we can take on a household by household basis.
Eliminate hazards in your home. Make a family emergency plan. Learn first aid. And have your family prepared to survive for 1 week.